Welcome to Moving Through and Beyond, a podcast dedicated to sharing inspired journeys of redefining life, vision, and purpose after immense hardship and grief. My goal with this podcast is to give you hope and to let my guest journeys inspire you to make the choice to keep looking up. I'm your host, Carey Conley. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Moving Through and Beyond. I get the honor and the privilege to bring some amazing people from all around the world that not only are colleagues of mine, but also become really great friends. And I was so excited when my friend Joseph James agreed to be here today. Thank you so much for this, Joseph. I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are.
Absolutely, Carey. I'm truly honored just to be on your show and be able to bring value to you as well as to your audience. Thank you.
Yes. So I want to tell you guys a little bit about Joseph. He is an international speaker and a leadership coach. He's on a mission to really change people's perspective on how they are showing up as leaders and how to, most specifically, leaders who are going through challenges in life and how they respond to it. And when he and I met, it wasn't too long after he lost his first wife. And I'm going to have him share that story. And when I was digging into your bio, I didn't realize, Joseph, that your dad also passed within less than 30 days of losing your wife. Wow. That's tough.
It was 22 days apart from each other.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And also leaving you with 3 young children. So when I met you, you were a single dad, full on doing all of that. And I know it was a challenge, but I know that you're remarried to the beautiful Rachel. You guys are on a mission together.
Yes, we are. We're on a mission and we're going full steam ahead.
Yeah. I'm going to have you share a little bit about that at the end too. So I bring guests on here, Joseph, as I told you, that have been through some sort of major life adversity. And, it's no secret that there are so many people living through what you've lived through, losing a loved one to an illness and, having to pick up and roll with it. And it's so hard. I mean, obviously I lost my husband, but it was much later in life. My kids were out of the house and, whole different things. So I would love for you to just share kind of your story of that and what helped you get through that.
Absolutely, Carey. Thank you so much. First thing I'll just say for those that are listening and have gone through, life's pain is number one is, your pain is going to be different than somebody else's. Don't ever compare your pain, and I know when my wife passed, and like you said earlier, is my dad had passed away on January the 5th of 2019. So we just passed 5 years, and 22 days later, I lost my wife to cancer. And, people kept on sending their condolences like normal people do. And they're like, I could never imagine this. I went through this. And they're like, I can't, I'm like, well, don't compare your pain. Right. It's very easy for us to hold back when, like your circumstance, losing, loved ones. And then I sit there and I put myself in the category of, well, I don't know what it's like, or, or, well, I did this too, is everybody goes through pain in different ways and everybody deals with it differently.
Yes.
Some people are still, I say stuck because that's where they're at. That's where they're at, right. And they haven't figured out how to move on. And I'll go ahead and get into the story is, in 2017, I convinced my wife to, let's have a third child, and why I did that, I don't know, but I did.
How old were the other kids, Joe?
The other ones at that time, 2017, my daughter was, 2008. So what's that? She was 9. Okay. And then my youngest son at the time was 7. So I had 9 and 7. Okay. We get pregnant. I'm all super excited. It was right around Father's Day. It was a Father's Day gift to me, or the announcement was, and, then, everything started happening. She started having challenges, nothing to do with the baby. She just started having challenges, started off with her legs, then it went to her heart and not sleeping. And we didn't know what was going on, but we kept on just pursuing the doctors, and long story short, they found this was about 8 weeks from the due date. Okay. So this we're in December of 2017, and we convinced the doctors to do an ultrasound, and they found a mass, and which they thought it was actually just a collection of blood, like, hey, let's go in, 2 more weeks, the baby will be at 36 weeks. We feel like the baby will be healthy enough that, do the normal NICU and things like that. But full brain development, the lungs will probably still be a little slow, but we feel like we can manage it. We're like, okay, let's do this. And we had the baby, very healthy, spent 4 weeks in NICU, just developing his lungs, but full brain, everything was great, right? And they did some ultrasounds on my wife, did some MRIs, and they're like, yeah, well, we're going to go in and we're going to do this. And we're like, hey, is there any chance that this could be cancerous? They're like, no, she's not an alcoholic. She doesn't have any type of family history. But they noticed, of liver, because the mass was on her liver. And about 4 or 5 weeks after she gave birth, she went into surgery. And Carey, when you get that news that you didn't expect, that just shatters it's almost like the movie that the earth is still spinning, but yet nothing is moving, right? Like you feel it. And I remember I take her into the hospital. The doctor says, hey, look, this is going to be a couple hours. I'll go home, go to work, do whatever you got to do. I'll give you a call. No problem. We're high on life, right? We're excited. We're just like, okay, God's going to do his thing and they're going to get this out of the way and no problems. And I remember that call, and I remember the doctor saying surgery went okay. And I knew that wasn't the voice, that just something was wrong. And coming from a medical background of degrees and working with doctors, I knew that wasn't the call, that everything was good, and he said, hey, your wife's got stage 4 metastatic cancer, and he's like, it started in the colon and it moved to the liver and then onto her spleen. Now, a healthy individual with a liver can, they can take out 70-75% of the liver and you can fully function. They took out over 80% on a sick individual. Doctor told me, said, Josie says, I don't know that she'll make it past the next 72 hours. And Carey, it rocked my world. I just didn't now have a wife with full-blown stage 4 colon cancer. I had to break the news to her family, to my family, to my kids, and I had to keep it from her. Now, that was my choice. And the reason why I kept it was my wife, I knew that if she found out, like, she would just mentally go downhill right off the bat. Like, she would have died right that weekend. I wasn't ready for it. Who is? I kept it from her for 96 hours, making sure that no doctor said the wrong thing. And,
So much of what you've said already, Joe, is just so powerful. Number one, you talking about, and I love that you shared this, that everybody's pain is different. And please acknowledge that. Because of what I've been through, so many people come forward to me when they've lost. There's a woman right now that's a friend of mine who lost her adult son right before Christmas and was waiting for her call. And I waited for her to call me because I know what that looks like. And she just was, inconsolable when we first talked. And that's the very first thing I said to her was, please understand that you're going to go through this differently than I did, and just honor that, right? And I love how you advocated with the doctors, right? For your wife. You knew something was wrong. And I don't think enough people follow their gut with that.
Yeah.
And so here you are, your life now is spinning off its axis. And I know this feeling because I've had that call twice, obviously losing my husband and my son. And now you've got 2 children and a baby. So I'm thinking, what in the world was holding you together at that moment?
It was, I guess, Carey, I can sit there and say God, right? And ultimately my faith is in God. But honestly, I think it was just the fact that I didn't think, like, when she was diagnosed and I found out the news, like, I felt such a peace. Like, I didn't feel like my wife was going to die. Not that we're any better than anybody else, but I just felt I felt peace in my heart. And I really felt like God shared to me, it's like, share your story. So I'm like, okay, if God's having me share my story, like, everything's going to be okay. Like, I had peace. And, it was I don't know exactly how at that moment I got through it, except for just completely just like, okay, God, this is in your hands. Now, I know that not everybody lives that way. I understand that, and I respect that. I respect their beliefs, and people tap into different strengths differently. People, might be a friend, might be another family member, and whatever that people do tap into it full fledged. You'll go 100%. If it's that person, that family member, and I think I really found a lot of relief by immediately sharing my story. Like when I had to call family and tell them, like I was telling them the story of everything. And I realize, and this is a very powerful statement, and I've learned to live by this, and I think it's got me through a lot of healing is this right here, is being vulnerable. By me being vulnerable, I help myself heal. But it's my transparency that helps other people heal. Because we are living in a fake society, in a fake world. You can have one profile on Facebook and another one in real life, and people don't see the realness. But here's the difference. We all experience pain. It just may be different, but you're going through pain, and your friend that's lost their son is going through pain. We're all going through some sort of pain, and people just truly want to know that they're not alone. It's not about being the same. It's about not being alone in it.
And this is so true, Joseph, because, when I lost my husband first, um, I had to tell the story over and over and over again. And every time you have to tell the story, here's what happens is it's you have to live the shock again because now they're hearing it for the first time. So, you go through that over and over again and you start getting to where you can share it and be prepared for that. You
Yeah,
get stronger every time, right?
absolutely.
And being transparent, definitely. I had a lot of people around me that saw, how I was going through this emotionally. And I made a choice, and I'm sure you did too, Joseph, as to how many people I let be around me for a while,
Oh yeah.
because it was so exhausting emotionally to share it over and over, right?
It absolutely is, and it can be for anybody, and I don't know why we go through the things that we go through in life or why things happen to certain people, why I lost my dad and then 22 days later I'm losing my wife. And then here's what a lot of people don't know is 45 days after my wife passed away. So my baby had just turned 1, January the 8th. So January the 5th, I lose my dad. January the 8th, he turns 1. January the 27th, I lose my wife. And 45 days after I lose my wife, my son, the 1-year-old, is being medevac to a hospital, flight lifted to a hospital for malnutrition, throwing up, vomiting, everything. And he spends 45 days in the hospital. It took doctors 30 days to figure out what was going on. And it was celiac disease. He had gluten. And so he had a gluten, deficiency or can't have gluten, but yet he was so malnutrition. They didn't know whether or not he was going to make it, because everything that they were giving him, his body was like, no, I'm not taking it. And so it was just one thing after another, after another. And I had to learn, I really began to learn who I was. I realized, Carey, that even with an 8-year-old and a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old is I didn't know how to parent. I'm like, I'm a father of 9 years and I feel lost. My helpmate was gone. My helper, my wife, my love, she was gone. We had been together for almost 16 years, married for almost 15, all of a sudden just gone. And we didn't prepare. I won't get into that, but we didn't do a lot of preparation, for that happening, right? Cause you want to believe, you want to have faith that it's not going to happen, and, but it taught me how to get through adversity. It taught me, and listen, I was feeling stuck. I was feeling like anybody else. What do you do? Like you said, that circle that you surround yourself. I started to distance myself because I didn't know what I was doing. you know?
I totally get this. Um, you do, you know, I'm so glad you're talking about that, Joe. So that you're talking about how you find yourself and you learn a lot about yourself, because I certainly have in the past now almost 9 years.
Yeah,
So much that I didn't know about myself before too, and I've given myself a lot of compassion in that, which in the
absolutely.
beginning was really hard because I think, and I don't know if you went through this, carrying so much guilt, right? Um, and just not wanting to be willing to share what you were really feeling and going through. So, yeah, thank you for saying that, because I think a lot of people need to hear that it is a learning process, but you also have to give yourself a lot of compassion in that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one thing that I think that helped when talking about sharing your story and is when she was diagnosed, she lived about 11 months after diagnosis. Okay. And when I felt in my spirit sitting in the hospital to share my story, is I learned a couple things, and this is I want to be able to give some tips to those that are struggling, that are going through something similar or going through any type of pain. It doesn't have to be the loss of a loved one. It could the world is going in all sorts of different directions, that people have lost jobs, and everybody's pain is different, right? But when I begin to share, I would go on Facebook. I would go on Facebook Live. I would share my story, and I was one. It was an easy way for me to share my story to the masses of my friends without having to tell the story 200 times all in one day. And the next day, start all over
And deal with the reactions.
and deal with reactions.
Yeah.
And I cried, I laughed, but what I realized was this right here, and this is a key point. A lot of people, when they go through something like this and any type of pain, they don't truly take the time to grieve. They feel like, I got to be strong. I've got kids. I've got this. I've got this. I've got my job. I've got all these. I just don't have time. I got to bottle it up. And then what happens when we bottle it? We know eventually it's going to be the volcano, right? It could be resentment. It could be just unforgiveness. It could be a lot of things that happen. But I realized about 10 months after my wife passed away and my dad, people kept on saying, Joseph, why do you smile so much? And I'm like, to begin with, I'm like, okay, God, right? But I'm like, that's so surface. People truly want to know. And especially those that may not have faith in God, like, well, how do you make it go? How do you make it through? And I realized that when I was telling my story, I would go out in my car, or I would go out to another room, and I would share my story. And during that time of crying, roughly 15, 20 minutes, that was my grieving time. And then I had to come back in, and I had to be strong for 3 kids and a wife. And I had to push, and I had to push, and I had to carry that burden on them, and not even realizing that cancer in itself is not a daily battle. It's not a month. It's a minute by minute. You're dealing with the emotions, no different than what you went through. The battle became a minute by minute kind of thing, you know? And I realized that, and I teach this to people, is take 15 minutes to grieve, 15, 20 minutes, and then dry your tears up, even if you can only do it for a minute. Because then the minute becomes 2, becomes 5, becomes 10, because it's kind of like the misty rain, right? We know that the misty rain kind of puts us in that slumber of, I just want to stay in bed and get cozy. And it's going to be like that all day long, right? Well, it kind of almost puts like a depression state on you, so to say. It's like, I don't want to do nothing today. Today's going to be an unproductive day, right? Well, it's the same thing when you're constantly crying, is you feel completely unproductive. You feel like you don't want to do anything. And it's very common. It happens. But I realized by taking just that 1 minute, that 30 seconds to dry my tears, okay, the 15 minutes, I would do it multiple times a day, but I wasn't grieving all day long because I had a minute break in there. I had a 2-minute break in there. And then those breaks helped me become stronger. And I didn't feel somberish all day long. I didn't feel depressive all day long. I went through depression. Don't get me wrong. Everybody goes through it. And again, that could be whether you've lost a loved one, whether you may be about to, or maybe it's been a job, maybe it's a divorce that you're going through. Everybody experiences pain, but I believe that by me taking that time to grieve, that helped me through my healing process.
Thank you for also sharing that because I had to learn that as well. When I lost my husband, I had just launched my speaking and coaching career, and it was taking off really
Yeah.
fast. And my son had just graduated from college. He was moving to Arizona. My daughter was going back to school. I mean, a lot was happening, Joe, and so I didn't really take that time until it would hit me out of the blue,
Yeah.
right? And now I've learned to give myself some space, and that does it does now I'm 9 years out, right, and 7 years for my son, and the roller coaster is not as high and as low,
Right.
right? So I think we need to point out that you and I have had some years in the making that we've had some days that where you just physically could not, right? Like my friend who's just lost her son, she's going to be like this for a little while. And it's a bummer because it's an awful feeling, but we got to go through it. So many, I'm so glad you're sharing all this because I'm hoping that it's helping so many people that you leaned on your faith, you leaned on some friends, you were very transparent with your story from the beginning. And you also gave yourself a lot of compassion to grow and learn through the whole thing. Um, and now being able to use your story as a speaker, which I know you do because I've heard you do it, a whole new life has developed for you,
Yes, it has.
right? So what's happening now?
So I am happily married. I met my now wife, Rachel, roughly about 2 years after Lisette, my first wife, passed away. And I did everything wrong. I I was alone, and as not that I was looking for a wife, but I was looking for help. I was looking for that conversation, that sit on the couch and let's just have a conversation with an adult. Because I had a then now 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and and so I went about it all the wrong way, and I make this joke when my wife Rachel and I, when we do this keynote, it's like when we met, everything was perfect. I mean, it was like Jesus being married. It was perfect for the first 7 days. And then we met on day 8 and it went to hell quick. And believe it or not, and I share this, when we're coaching now, is we lived a toxic relationship. I was bringing in baggage. I was unhealed. She was bringing in baggage from a bad divorce. She was unhealed. And we were two unhealed individuals trying to make something work. And none of us were trying to do a rebound. We just had not got out of our own way yet. And now, I'm an alpha and so was she. And it was like two rams going head to head at it constantly, and what we do now is just amazing what has transpired because we are more than just happily married. We actually travel and teach people how to live a prosperous married life God's way because we went through hell. We had to not only just figure out how to go through it. We didn't go to counseling. We figured this out. We were two people that were willing to grow. We didn't want to stay where we were at. We didn't know how to get out of it. Okay. And we were doing everything wrong. And we finally just said, you know what? as a leader that God's called me to be as the foundation of my home. Okay. I finally said, you know what, God, I'm done doing it my way. And I just completely just turned everything over. I surrendered. And when I did, and I went to Rachel and I said, listen, we are not going to do this anymore. We're done. We're done doing this. We're done doing it our way. You're either going to do it God's way because I'm submitting fully to God, or you can go. You and your daughter can go. And I'm not trying to put you out on the street, but I have to draw the line. And she, and in her own way, she's like, it's about time.
Wow. What a God story.
Yeah. And that's where we're at now. And we're enjoying life. We technically got married twice. In March, this March will be 1 year. We did everything through the church and through the state, got everything legal, and then let's do the big ceremony. Okay. And 6 months later, so at the end of September, we did the big ceremony with friends and family and stuff like that. So technically I get to celebrate my marriage every 6 months. I don't know if that's going to hurt my wallet or not, but
yeah, well,
we're enjoying life.
Well, I follow you and Rachel, and I see what you're doing, and it's admirable because I know that you are really wanting to help
Yes.
people with their marriages, help men lead better and women.
Yes.
And I see you just going everywhere. So tell people how they can find you, Joseph.
The greatest way to find us, we just launched a new Facebook, or I'm sorry, a new Instagram page. Okay. And it's called Shattered, the number two, Unbreakable, Shattered to Unbreakable Marriage. Okay. It's the greatest one. And of course, there's links on there to find my personal one. You can reach out to me that way as well. But Shattered to Unbreakable Marriages, we have a mission, Carey, to help those that are struggling in their marriage. Okay. Years ago, I looked at marriage as a success. If you're married 30 and 40 years, man, that's great. But I've come to find out that the years don't mean anything because there's plenty of people that are miserable.
Miserable, yes.
And they've been married for 30, 40 years.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And there's all sorts of different things that we talk about. It is faith-based, but at the end of the day, this is what I want to share with people. You can live, God or not God, okay? All right? You can live a healthy life within yourself, within your marriage, within your family. And I know you talk about it. I love ULA because I love the 7 F's because that's what we're going after in our own life is becoming better, a newer version of ourselves in all those areas. And we're doing it through married couples.
So inspiring. And I really, truly hope if you are listening to this, ladies and gentlemen, and you are going through the loss of a spouse, I hope that this encourages you to know that you can lean in and get the help that you need from God, from higher power, from your friends and family that really truly want to support you and go through this, and that you can learn from it and grow a whole new life, Joseph. Right? So you've been so encouraging and inspiring, and I just want to thank you again for being on with me today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for just bringing value to such a vast audience, because I know that you've been through it and you've gone through a lot more than once, and I know you said the roller coaster it changes, but yet it's still there. We're still on it, and we'll always be on it. It's just different, and I got to say this closing, Jim Rohn said it. Tony Robbins says it. Every great speaker says it. You are the people that you surround yourself around with, right? But when you're going through something like this, surround yourself with people that will uplift you, And one of the things my brother told me that helped me out so much, he says, Joseph, whether you're right or wrong, just do it. Whether you feel like you're right or wrong, just do it. Whatever makes you better at that moment, because you don't know if it's right or wrong.
Great advice. Great advice. And again, I think that comes with compassion. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again, Joe. You're always great to see. I hope I see you sometime on a stage somewhere soon.
Yes.
And we can have some fun together. So
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of Moving Through and Beyond. I'm your host, Carey Conley, here to remind you to keep looking up. If you found this episode inspiring or helpful, please share it with a friend or a family member. In order to be successful on this mission, I can't do it alone. Connect with me at www.careyconley.com, and don't forget to sign up for my weekly Do It On Purpose newsletter. Let's build this life-giving vision movement together to end this epidemic, save lives, and create purpose.